So, interestingly enough, whenever we go on tour here at Bellefontaine Cemetery and we roll by the Adolphus Busch Mausoleum, everybody always wants to know, why is there a baptismal font out there on the left-hand side? It's not a baptismal font. As I like to say, it's probably the world's most expensive flower pot, and it is a byproduct of the fact that that mausoleum was built by Lily to protect the image and the memory of, as she called him, her prince. And so that flower pot, that very ornate flower pot, was something that she would bring live plant material on a regular time. And she outlived Adolphus by a number of years. And so once she passed, nobody was there to take care of it. And so the cemetery was a little concerned that it might fill with water and split sometimes. So they're the ones who created the lid for that, which I think really makes it look like a baptismal font. Yes. But it's not a baptismal font.
This is the Can You Dig It podcast. We crawl into the crypts, gardens, and forgotten cemeteries. Join Dan Fuller, your resident cemetery chronicler, and Joe Shields, the plot-loving development exec, as we unearth the dark secrets of St. Louis and Bellefontaine Cemetery and beyond. From garden geeks to history buffs with a taste for the macabre, as well as fans of iconography, this is your podcast. We love diving deep into the shadows of history. Let's dig in.
Did you know that Bellefontaine Cemetery is a perfect 5 miles from our old courthouse? And that happens to be for a reason. And people, again, putting things into historic context, 5 miles in 1849 is an hour horse and buggy ride. And that was part of the idea. The part of the idea of Bellefontaine as what will become known as a rural or garden cemetery is to be out in the country, into a natural setting. And so you would get in your horse and buggy at the city center, you'd start heading north, you'd get out of the city of St. Louis at St. Louis Avenue, you'd start going through the separate smaller town of Bremen, and then once you got through Bremen, you'd start hitting some plantation style houses there overlooking the river. Right below us was Athlone. And so then you'd arrive to Bellefontaine Cemetery, a garden or rural cemetery, and you felt like you were back into nature. You were away from all of the clutter, noise, and most importantly, odors of the city. I want you to think about all of those horses and what they're doing. It was not a pleasant experience. But once you got that hour outside the city, you had fresh air, you had the green trees, and we are able to maintain that still to this day, now as an accredited level 3 arboretum on the ArbNet scale, with over 9,000 trees on our 314 acres.
It's an amazing story. What Dan had just described, the reason that we're here today is I'm going to take you back to 1804, Paris, France. Père Lachaise is the first rural or garden cemetery created. And the thought process was, because cemeteries or graveyards or boneyards were unsightly, and I'm using air quotes, unsightly, unsanitary, and to be honest, ladies and gentlemen, it's real estate in a major population center that could be repurposed for other reasons other than burials. The thought process of this rural cemetery movement was to take a place of interment 5 miles outside of a major population center, out into the quote-unquote country, and then have a landscape architect come in and carefully plan it. Because they wanted these pieces of property to mimic what the next realm would look like, or the next life. So whether it be heaven, Valhalla, Shangri-La, whatever flavor you subscribe to, they wanted this property to be pastoral, to be pleasing, calming. You know, you're forever home. So a landscape architect is going to come through and have winding roads, brooks, lakes, hills, valleys, to be pleasing, to be aesthetically pleasing.
There was even a departure on the iconography, and that's one of those things I'm sure we'll talk about in greater depth later on down the line. But pre this garden movement, it was really the skull and crossbones and the fire and brimstone at the pulpit, and you know, you're going to a bad place if you're not a good person. And this will change in the Victorian era to giving away of the skull and crossbones, and now you have the little cupids and angels. And this is a time when you stop to think about it, for every 7 births, there would be 2 children who would not see the age of 14. And so this more romantic and pleasant environment that Joe is describing was much more palatable by the children who are going to come from these families who have lost brothers and sisters. So it's never just one thing, it's the total package. And so when you would come to Père Lachaise or to Bellefontaine Cemetery, it is a pleasant visit with the relatives, whether they be with us and came along on the carriage ride, or you had left them there the last time they were laid to rest.
So the concept was wildly successful in Paris, and that movement would take off, literally, because it made its way through Western Europe, and then it made its way to the United States in 1831. Between 1831 and 1870, roughly 30 of these types of cemeteries would come online in the United States. The first would be in Boston, which is Mount Auburn Cemetery in 1831. And between 1831 and 1870, like I'd said, you'd had several of these cemeteries come online, and then we're right in the middle. Bellefontaine Cemetery in Arboretum is incorporated by an act of the Missouri General Assembly in May of 1849. So we're right in the middle of the bunch. We started off with 138 acres. It was a land purchase that the first administration had bought from the Kennett family, Luther and Agnes Kennett, and it was known as the Hempstead Farm because it had originally been a farm owned by the Hempstead family. So in this part of North St. Louis, where Bellefontaine Cemetery in Arboretum is at, you had an incredible coincidence of pieces and parcels of land owned by historical rock stars. Next door to Bellefontaine is Calvary Cemetery, and that is a large archdiocese cemetery that would open up in 1854. Well, that land was owned by Kentucky Senator Henry Clay, who was a member of the House of Representatives. He was a senator, he was a speaker of the House of Representatives, and he was a Secretary of State. That was his vacation farm next door. You have the Kennetts who owned this piece of land. Colonel John O'Fallon had a piece of land right near here. Henry Miller Shreve had a piece of land that pretty much connected to this. So this could almost be an episode in itself, how this part of North St. Louis was the mid-19th century settled. The land ownership was civic rock stars.
Yeah, and it's there because there was, at that point, a picturesque river valley view. That held true until the 1930s when the levee system was put in, and then the commerce would inch its way from St. Louis further and further north. And we're still here, but unfortunately that beautiful vista down below is gone. But as Joe said, you had all of these families in close proximity. And of course, there's some of the center component of who is going to create this. John O'Fallon actually initially had a family graveyard in downtown St. Louis. And when the mandate came about in 1849 for all of those to be shut down, it is here that he chose to bring his family. Now, interestingly enough, and I'm sure yet another episode down the line, when John O'Fallon brought the family, he didn't keep them all in one place. He kind of spread them out a little bit. He put his uncle up towards the northeast. He took a nice center section, and then some other people that he had on that family graveyard who technically weren't family. People like John Miller, who was the fourth governor of the state, and Stephen Watts Kearney, who is associated, of course, with Jefferson Barracks. They ended up with their own family lots. And so John O'Fallon secures this wonderful piece of property right in the, dead center of the cemetery, the largest family lot here with enough room to do 500 burials. And this is where, again, to dispel one of the rumors in St. Louis, we're not historic and shut down. We're an active cemetery still servicing these families that we've been servicing for now 175 years.
So the movement, now we're in the mid-19th century, and major metropolitan areas of the U.S. are opening these types of cemeteries, which is a great story. Or the founders of each one of these cemeteries, or the men and women who incorporated the cemeteries, were, for the most part, civic rock stars of their own respective cities. So each of these cemeteries has an incredible story with the men and women who founded it, just like Bellefontaine does. The 11 people who founded our cemetery, there was a core group of them that make up a significant amount of regional and national history. And when you go to Cave Hill in Louisville.
Yeah, Cave Hill is my favorite kissing cousin.
And if you even start at the beginnings out in Boston and New York with Mount Auburn and Greenwood, visiting and hearing the stories of how they were founded and who they were founded and the struggles that they had to obtain charters, there's a thread that you can go from city to city to city. We had problems getting our charter as well. May of 1849 was successful, but we had tried about 9 years before that, and we were unsuccessful in getting a charter from the state of Missouri, and I know that other cemeteries had those same issues.
The end result, though, is this thing that is located in these cities that are kind of mirrors of the community that they're part of, and we'll kind of bounce back and forth for a little bit between ourselves and Cave Hill. Like I said, our kissing cousin, about the same size. They started a year ahead of us. They are equally an active cemetery. And if you want to find out about Colonel Sanders, you go there. If you want to find out about Muhammad Ali, you go there. And so there's these reflections of the community that they're a part of that you can learn about. You go to our friends, and we have a direct connection to our friends at Greenwood Cemetery in New York. And that is in the fact that a man that needs a mention, and that's Almron Hotchkiss. He had done an extension there at Greenwood, only to be swiped away by the 11 individuals that Joe was referring to here to Bellefontaine to create the first Gardner Rural Cemetery. And so he kind of cut his teeth, improved his passion to an extent, and took it to a zenith here at Bellefontaine. So we have this legacy and connection to all these other cemeteries that fit into the classification that Joe's identified.
It's a close community of counterparts that work at these other cemeteries. So the person that Dan had mentioned, Almron Hotchkiss, was a landscape architect. And he was a notable landscape architect, and that's why the administration who founded Bellefontaine targeted him. They would go up there with a letter and an offer in hand. They would steal Almron to come here to design the cemetery, but ironically enough, he stayed for the next 40 years.
Yeah, even though he designed 6 other parcels of land, some cemeteries, some planned communities, he's always rubber banding back to us.
And I'm going to say, as a landscape architect, he had a good eye. And how do I know he had a good eye? I'm going to go out on a limb and say he had a good eye because he knew what St. Louis offered. He knew the opportunity here, so he had the foresight to stay here for the next 40 years, and his son, Frank, would take over as the second superintendent for another 19 years, Dan?
20 years.
20 years. So the first, 60 years of our existence was under Almron and Frank Hotchkiss. And the reason I mention the other cemeteries is as far as our counterparts. So I'm the director of development for Bellefontaine Cemetery, and Dan's the chronicler, our historian. Dan, you'd mentioned Almron Hotchkiss and his ties to Greenwood in St. Louis, and I would like to talk about my personal interaction with my other counterparts in other cemeteries and how Hotchkiss plays into that. And we're going to hear about that when we come right back.
Podcasts are a powerful tool to reach your target market in today's digital age. Here's why. Listeners can tune in whenever and wherever they want, fitting your podcast seamlessly into their lives. Unlike videos, podcasts don't require full attention, allowing listeners to multitask while absorbing your message. Podcasts foster a more intimate and personal connection with your audience compared to text-based content. Podcasts allow you to niche down and target a specific audience with interests directly relevant to your message. Now, why launch your podcast with EG Media Group? EG Media Group is a one-stop shop for all your podcasting needs. They'll help you with strategic planning. They'll develop a plan to reach your target audience and achieve your podcasting goals. Their team will ensure your podcast sounds professional and polished. They'll help you get your podcast out there and reach new listeners. So, if you're looking to leverage the power of podcasting to connect with your target market, visit egmediagroup.com today and turn your podcasting dream into a reality. That's egmediagroup.com. EG Media Group. Create, connect, convert.
So the rural cemetery movement of the 19th century in Almron Hotchkiss, he plays a significant role. As Dan had mentioned a few minutes ago, he played a part in designing Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Then, of course, we stole him from Greenwood, and he would spend the next 40 years in St. Louis. He was significant enough to the movement to help with numerous cemeteries and designing numerous cemeteries, at least 2 large major cemeteries. And there's the chapel at Bellefontaine Cemetery in Arboretum is named in his honor, Hotchkiss Chapel. So a couple years ago, I go to Greenwood for the first time, Greenwood in Brooklyn, to sit with colleagues and discuss best practices, introduction, just building bridges. And I think they were just as excited to have us up there as I was excited to have traveled up there. So I go into their historic building, right as soon as you go through the gate. I sat down with my counterpart, the director of development, some people from horticulture, I believe one of their historians, and everybody's got a smile on their face and a notebook in their lap. And I'm like, I'm the greenhorn in the room. I'm just this kid from St. Louis, and, it's just me. And I'm with all these counterparts, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't help but smile. So it maybe took 1.7 seconds to talk about, well, you stole Amerlin from us. And do you have a picture? And I'm like, no. I was going to ask, I had my notebook. I'm like, and I pointed, this is my first question for you. Who's got the picture of Hotchkiss?
Nobody has a picture yet.
Right.
We have a picture. We know where a picture of his wife is, but we do not have an image of him. And that's one of the things on the more historic archival side that we are definitely searching for. We want to know what Almond looked like. Now, if you really want to take it back, you can go back to a couple of generations. We can find you a Hotchkiss watch or a clock made by one of his ancestors, but we can't find a photo of Almond.
Now the event and volunteer coordinator, Lacey Reinhardt, had found a Hotchkiss descendant last fall in Indiana, and she recognized, I am a Hotchkiss descendant. I wrote a paper about him in college. And then, ironically enough, immediately, she asked Lacey, do you have a picture of him? And Lacey was laughing. No. I was going to ask you the same thing, hopefully. So they shared some documents back and forth. But in our archives, in what we call the vault here at the cemetery, there is a most wanted list of people that we want pictures of. And Hotchkiss is one of them. So, ladies and gentlemen out there, if anybody has a picture of Almerlin Hotchkiss, please contact us immediately.
Yeah, no, and we will find. We had a very interesting story not too long ago about one of our founders. We had some really bad imagery for William McPherson, and ironically, from that archive that Joe was talking about, I found a letter that basically said, hey, we sent this portrait over to the Missouri Historical Society. We hope that you found a good place for it. And they basically acknowledged receipt of that, and it was placed in a particular office. And when I found that, I got in contact at the Missouri Historical Society, and they're like, yep, we know right where it's at. And within a matter of a few moments, we got some digital images of the portrait that was painted, interestingly enough, by a man named Connett, who happens to be also a resident of Bellefontaine Cemetery. All full loop.
It was exciting. I was on a call in my office, and Dan comes in with his laptop, and he shows me this portrait of a Victorian era looking gentleman, and I'm on a call, and I'm thinking, well, who in the heck is this? And it took me a good 5 seconds to figure out, oh my gosh, it's over. We now have a verified, clear image of this man. And when I speak publicly about the cemetery and I talk about the founders, now I'm only missing two, but there was a third that I was missing, which is William McPherson. And I would joke with the crowd, and I treated them like playing cards. All these pictures, they're all the same size, all the same card stock. And I would say, if anybody has a James Yateman, if anybody's William McPherson, I'll trade you a Yateman for a McPherson. Like, come on, ladies and gentlemen, somebody's got to have this. Come on.
So you take that one out of your deck of cards.
That was exciting, because now we're only down to two that we don't have a
yeah, but
picture.
We're hot on the track. We're doubling back to the northeast for our Augustus
Brewster. So yes, Dan and his team of just dedicated volunteer researchers are like Dan had said, on the trail, the hot trail of Augustus Brewster. So that'll be breaking news for a future episode, that we are just now we're just missing one picture, and that's Philander Salisbury.
Yeah, but he died so young.
He was 38.
As far as early in our history, but he was a military hero, so maybe there's something associated with that we can tie into. But he was our first founder of the 11 who passed, and of course was laid to rest with us.
Right.
So one of the things that we are Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum, and a lot of people ask what an arboretum is. And so just a handful of years ago, we were accredited at level 2 and have moved to level 3. And I'll let Joe expand on that in just a little bit. But what I want people to know is we've always had the trees. We've always, as a garden or a rural cemetery, had this lush canopy here. And part of it is by our design of Almerlin Hotchkiss, who we've mentioned before, and the fact that 80% of the cemetery is family lots. Now, Those family lots are circles, squares, rectangle, heart-shaped. And when you put those shapes together, they create voids. And that is a perfect place to plant a tree, because we really can't have a tree where anybody is or will be in the future. So the trees have been synonymous with us since the get-go, but it's only just recently that we have received this accreditation from ARBNet.
ARBNet, or the Morton Arboretum, is the only global entity to give Arboretum accreditation. In September of 2022, we were at level 2 Arboretum, one of 2 in the city of St. Louis. It's Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum, and then Tower Grove Park. But then we got bumped up to a level 3 Arboretum through an incredible effort from our horticulture team, which I cannot say enough about. The horticulture director and his team are world class. They are miracle performers. So we received a level 3 Arboretum accreditation. And that bumps us into a very small fraternity of other rural cemeteries in the U.S. from the rural cemetery movement that are level 3 arboretums. There's 5 of us. Our direct counterparts, when I say direct counterparts, I mean people that we have almost a weekly working relationship with. Somebody on staff at Bellefontaine at some point, whether it be our CEO Sherry Smith would talk with another CEO, or the director of horticulture development is going to interact with Spring Grove in Ohio. That's another level 3 arboretum. That's a historic cemetery. And then Greenwood in Brooklyn. So that's one thing that ties us all together is, we're green spaces in the middle of a major metropolitan area. And ironically enough, now we are all trying to find ways to sustain the grounds, have philanthropic programs that enrich our communities around us, and just be good citizens.
Good stewards.
Good stewards of the land.
Right.
Programming that is offered at Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum is comprehensive across the board with history and horticulture. So programs you're going to find are going to be the second and fourth Saturday of every month. There are 2 trolley tours that follow our tour line. And that's going to give you a little bit about a lot. So I would say it's the general history of St. Louis and the cemetery. You're going to find beer barons, African American history, Civil War. You're going to find St. Louis notables. It's going to be a little bit of everything. But then there are specialized tours. There are walking tours that are going to give you a springtime walking tour. It's almost going to be a different experience almost every time because of just the nature of what's blooming and what's on deck to bloom and what is currently going out.
And then in the summer, we'll do a sunset stroll from 5:30 to 7:30. It's a unique way to see the cemetery, also beat the heat a little bit. We're not particularly fond of the heat in June, July, and August in St. Louis, so this gives us a chance to do that. And I will say that our wildlife is a little bit more accustomed to having the place to themselves. So you might see a possum, a raccoon, or one of our 2 varieties of skunks popping out, a few turkeys here and there, and of course a whole lot of birds.
You're going to find mausoleum walking tours where we're going to take you on one of 3 versions, Mausoleum 1, Mausoleum 2, and Mausoleum 3. And we're going to go from site to site, and we're going to talk about the history of the families interred. We're going to talk about iconography. We're going to talk about the difference between an underground mausoleum and why somebody would want to do that. And 10 families have given us permission to enter their private family mausoleum. So depending on the tour, what version of the tour you're on, we are going to take you inside and give you a first-person view of the beauty of an interior of a mausoleum. If you haven't been on one of these tours, it is a sight to behold. It's a hell of an experience.
And then we do have a couple of specialized tours now in 2024. The 4th day of each month, March through November, we're doing an Eads-centric tour as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of the opening of the Eads Bridge. And then one of the most important events in St. Louis history, celebrating 120 years this year, is the 1904 World's Fair, or the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, in and around April 30th and in and around December 1st each year. We celebrate that with focusing on people significant to the grandest of fairs, as I like to say.
And the Eads name that Dan had mentioned, that's Captain James Buchanan Eads, arguably one of the brightest engineers in all of history, and his name in academia is going to be mentioned right up there with Leonardo da Vinci.
We are very lucky in the fact that we are just 3/4 of a mile from the Mississippi River. Therefore, that puts us on a migratory path. So as we treat nature better, nature treats us better. And a perfect example of that would be the fact that when we softened our lower lake, which is known as Cascade Lake, and made it more user-friendly for waterfowl, the next year we saw 5 new forms of waterfowl there. And so it's kind of back to that whole aspect of you build it, they will come. And so we try and reach out to all members of our community who are involved with nature, the environment, the Missouri Department of Conservation, some of the universities that are here that are doing studies, whether they be bat studies that have been done here, or the Audubon Society doing bird counts. As a very important green space, we can give back to our community that way, as well as other ways on a more philanthropic side of things. But it's an important green space with a lot of connection that goes all the way back to that formation of Père Lachaise in Paris, France in 1904.
Yes.
So as an active cemetery, I think most people are very shocked at the fact that we have 100 acres of our 314 we've never even touched. And this is going to be where we're a sharp difference between a lot of our East Coast counterparts, where maybe they're a little bit further along in their process, and they're looking for creative ways to utilize the last of their space. We're not under that pressure at this particular point. So we can be creative, and we have a robust horticulture staff, as Joe said, that can maybe look at some new concepts and plans going forward. Wildwood Valley Gardens is an example of that. It is a botanical garden setting in a cemetery. It's a little over an acre right now, but it has the ability to grow to as much as maybe 3, 4, or even 5 acres and have different opportunities for people to be buried. And this is where we introduce something that I'm not sure how many of our counterparts do, but we have the ability to do a green or a natural burial. And so that's rather unique, at least in the St. Louis metropolitan area, because we're one of only 2 established cemeteries that have that capability. And it is a way for people who are much more environmentally friendly to exit this world in an environmentally friendly way.
You know, programming ties us together too. The events that some of our sister cemeteries put on are very similar to ours. If you take a look nationally, I think we're probably, I would dare say that we have the most robust event program out there overall, year in, year out, for the diversity of what we do and the number of what we do.
Some of our friends are doing nighttime movie things that we can't quite pull off just yet. Maybe that'll be in our future. My friends down at Oakland Cemetery, who we do 5Ks and 10Ks with them, but they're a little bit more developed, and they can be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek than we can here in the Midwest. They do a 5K called Run Like Heck, and their 10K is Run Like Hell.
I love the creativity of it, you know, the entrepreneurial spirit, which Dan Fuller had an idea a few months ago to rebrand our 5K, 10K, which is traditionally Foxtrot and Coyote Crawl. And Dan had an idea that I fully support, and I hope someday comes to fruition, because it's the most brilliant name for a race I think a cemetery will ever have, and it is Run While You Still Can.
Yeah, well, you know, you gotta have a little humor about this.
It takes a lot for me to laugh out loud, and that was outstanding.
But you know, death and taxes are, you know, inevitable for everyone, and I think when you are at ease with, yes, at some point in time we'll all be together in this parcel of land, I think it's a little easier to kind of move forward from that, and, you know, just have some fun with it. So whether you're, you know, taking a walk, taking a trolley, or maybe even getting a trike ride through the cemetery.
Which is the only way to traverse any cemetery, by far. So, green burial is a fairly new concept to most, but if you go back not too many decades, it was the only way to be buried. You know, before vaults and were a standard, and for outer containers and for embalmment, that was green burial. So one thing that ties us together, besides a push over the last 5 or 6 years for green burial, is death education. Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn has on staff a full-time death midwife or death doula, and her name's Gabrielle Gatto, and that's her sole purpose, is teaching death education, normalizing death, going out into the community. And Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum's event volunteer coordinator, Lacey Reinhardt, is going to start doing that for Bellefontaine in 2025. And there are other historic rural cemeteries that have found that brings value for many reasons, and that is another thing that ties us all together.
Yeah, and again, it's that education. I mean, everything I like to think of that we do is some form of education, whether it be about the people who are here, what it means to be a garden cemetery, the fact that we are part of the end of life, the death process. All of that is education, and to remove some of the stigma and the concern about that, and to make this a place that you're introduced to and you're not afraid of. So some communities are a little at odds, we'll say, with cemeteries. They don't know what's going on. Actually, a few years ago, I was working with the main archivist at the state of Missouri who's in charge of cemeteries. And she basically said, if you open your gates, do tours, embrace your community, take away the mystery and the stigma about the cemetery, become a part of basically your community, you won't have some of the strife that some cemeteries have with vandalism and things of that nature. And I think that definitely works in our favor. And again, we try to be as good a neighbor as possible, whether it be with Mark Twain, which is the neighborhood directly across us, Sunny Mount Baptist Church, North County, through our philanthropic arms, we are trying to be an active and a friendly neighbor to our folks that are live around us.
What ties us together as a group in 1849 is the fact that we were part of the rural cemetery movement. These pieces of land were under construction. They're the civic rock stars of, for the most part, each metropolitan area were stewarding this process as it goes on. And then Dan, as our historian, has shown me literally on a piece of paper how you can chart decades where the cemetery administration where they weren't aggressive with sales. So you can see ebbs and flows with internments, disinterments, where other cemeteries were, because of population shift here in St. Louis, you would have several cemeteries on St. Charles Rock Road open up, and we would lose hundreds of people because families moved in that direction. They wanted to take their loved ones in that direction. Other historic cemeteries in the United States can see the same thing. And they went through periods and ebbs and flows of aggressive administrations where they're not so aggressive. And we are at a point now, but I am so proud to be part of the staff at Bellefontaine, because we have a very supportive and forward-thinking CEO in Sherry Smith. And then if you fan out to the staff, and I'm not trying to spin this, everybody is dedicated. Everybody is passionate. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 10 for everybody. And we exude that. And I believe the staff of Bellefontaine is in a period right now where 100 years from now, our successors are going to be able to point and say, guys, we're here now because of this period that we have been in for 10 years.
You and I both like the numbers, so we can take a look at the numbers and we can see all of that, and everything that Joe identified has definitely happened in our past. And that included a period of time when maybe we went a little turtle and we kind of pulled in and we didn't do the things that we did then and we're doing now. And a lot of people will look at us and say, this is something new, something different. No, it's actually a return to what we were a part of, and it is the culture of the garden movement. This is a place where you can have a wedding. This is the place where you can celebrate the lives of the people who have passed. This is the place that you can take a trolley tour, or you can take a trike tour, or you can take a walking tour, and know that you're going to be a little bit smarter at the end of that. You're going to know and learn something that you didn't know before. And that's the way it always was supposed to be. The young and the old would wander off and hear about the iconography, and then those that would take care of the family yards. It's a little bit different in the fact that we have a horticulture team, and we do have people who teach you about the iconography, or we have a death doula coming on board to help with that aspect. But we are reigniting the fire of what was the rural cemetery movement and the garden movement. And to do it here in St. Louis, along with our East Coast counterparts, we're kind of leading the charge, I think.
So we invite you to come to Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum and experience everything that Dan and I have been talking about, because it is a sight to behold. It is a wonder. And I would say the most underutilized cultural institution in the St. Louis region.
We've been declared the best kept secret for long enough. I think the secret needs to go away to a certain extent. And I think just by entering the gates, you get a certain feel and a certain calmness about. This is not hit you in the pie kind of face cemetery. This is we kind of ease you into it. Now we wrap your arms around. We make you feel a little more comfortable. To spin something back to our friends in Chicago, and we do this comparison all the time. The Getty Mausoleum at Graceland Cemetery versus the Wainwright Mausoleum in Bellefontaine, both designed by Louis Sullivan, but much like that so-so Cubs baseball team in Chicago, we have a much better baseball team in the Cardinals, and so Getty is okay, but Wainwright is so much better.
And maybe someday for a future episode, we can invite some native Chicagoans here to talk about, are you okay with the fact that we stole the Olympics?
Yeah. That'd be a good one. Maybe they didn't even know yet.
We can build bridges.
Yeah.
We can, get that rivalry down.
Yeah. If you're interested to see what's going on at Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum, all you need to do is go to bellefontainecemetery.org, and that is our website. And from there, you'll find an events tab. If you go to that events tab, you'll see all the different programming that's available, and that's the best way to get your feet kind of wet here at the cemetery. If you come in on your own, right at 4947 West Florissant, just inside, you'll also find a lending library box next to our office where you can get your own map to do a little self-guided tour along our 3.7-mile tour line that you'll find quite a bit of interest in and maybe will tantalize you to come back.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, and please share this episode with your family and friends. If you got value from the episode as well as the podcast, you can do it right from the platform you are listening on. Take a screenshot and tag us and tag yourself. We are at Podcast Can You Dig It on Instagram.